Hello, all. Welcome to Plan Stage Weekly, September 8th, 2022. We have Heinrich with the first point.
Yeah, so this is the mixed deployment compatibility has been like a, like controversial topic, or, I just also wanted to hear some thoughts from other engineers here in Plan. Like, do you actively think about this when you develop stuff or something? And here I just wanted to share like one example where we worked on the move to start and end. And so basically this was deployed in multiple deploys to GitLab.com, right? Backend was deployed first to GitLab.com. A few weeks later, the front end was deployed or merged. It was just merged like yesterday or something. So it's gonna get deployed in a few days or today. And then this is, both of them are gonna land in 15, what was the number? 15.4. And so it can cause multi version failures in self-hosted because they would upgrade to 15.3 to 15.4, and that would contain both DMRs, right? So during their deploys, it would cause problems. But then during that incident where we had with it's a different multi-version problem, but I just wanted to raise that it's hard to get to be perfect where we have 100% compatible milestones. And sometimes being like good enough, maybe like better, like worth it, because the cost to be 100% is really high. It's like very hard to think about all these cases, let alone catch them. And so, yeah, that was my proposal to delivery, to like maybe lower our expectations to customers about these things. And we don't even know if customers actually depend on these things, right? Customers doing no downtime deploys. Yeah. Sorry about that, crying baby, if you can hear it.
I agree with this a lot. Like, cross compatibility is a huge problem. We've had these conversations. Honestly, I do think about it all the time, but most of the time I just have to ignore it because it's just too hard. There are some ways sometimes to mitigate. One way is feature flags, and I'm not talking development feature flags, I'm talking like licensed feature flags, but we can't do it for every tiny change. Like, we do it at a high level. It's like, oh, our iterations available, our epics available, and so on. And we do it in some places, probably not enough. So I would probably just be like, oh, we could do it a bit more, but we can't do it at every little tiny granular thing. Like this one in particular is really small. I thought we were okay with shipping backend and frontend in the same milestone. No, it's a big debate, but I thought it was okay. I didn't realize this was going to cause problems, but overall, I agree with what you're saying, Heinrich.
Yeah, this is also part of the confusion. Like, what is it really okay or is it not to be in a single milestone or docs? I mean, I think it was added at first. That when I first wrote that doc about multi-version thing, I was like mainly focused on GitLab.com deploys. And then I think after a while, delivery came in and like added, like, we want to also ensure this for self-managed and in our monthly releases. And that is like much harder to think about and enforce, right? And slows down velocity like so much more. And so
Yeah, I didn't think it's worth the velocity slowdown of not being able to ship a feature in a single milestone. And then just, if you then need to make changes once the front end's rolled out, then that's another 2 milestones before you could deploy your fix potentially. And there's also that if it affects anyone other than .com in the first place, then there's still like the chance that if they're not updating every version, which I assume most people don't, then you wouldn't be able to skip a version. So how would we enforce that you don't jump straight from 15.3 to 15.5? Like, you have to do 15.4 first if you want to zero downtime deploy and things like that. It seems like a lot of complexity for limited upside.
Yeah, and I was talking to Heinrich about this earlier, but I know we haven't been. So yes, technically we're not supposed to have front end changes and back end changes to GraphQL to like add a field or anything within a single milestone. It's supposed to be one after the other. So the 2 milestone requirement. I know we're not following that every time. That's a fact that we're not. And knowing that we don't do that, and we've shipped front end and back end in the same milestones, and we haven't gotten a customer complaint about things not working at the level that it would be broken, kind of tells me that it's not like we're optimizing something that doesn't that's not worth the loss of, or for something that's not worth the loss of velocity that we have with waiting for 2 milestones there. Yeah, so I had a question, Deepika. I'm only picking on you because you've been the most recent onboarding, and I think the only one since we put together a training on multi-version compatibility. Do you remember going through that at all through the onboarding process, like viewing the training on multi? Yeah, so
I haven't, but then I agree there have been talks that upon, whatever coffee chats, whatever I've listened for the past, whenever since I've come here, that the front end, front end only happens after the back end. But I've seen MRs, I've reviewed Natalia's MR as well, where Heinrich was working on one, and I've seen this happening. I don't know about it was merged in the same milestone, but here also it didn't make sense to just not merge the MR just because it is in the same milestone. I mean, we tested it, like we started it working in the initial phase of 15.4. So it has been like 2.5 weeks since, and it was tested. It was like the UX was approved, and it was working fine. And I mean, just because we didn't have to merge it in the same milestone, we didn't have to stop. So, and I don't know. So it was like in the earlier stages when I was like, every time I was rebasing, I was having issues because changes. I was like, God, why isn't it the master? Because, but then after that, I realized that this feature went because Heinrich is very fast at how he makes changes. So it only helped me with instant feedback and instant changes. So like I'm pretty happy. Like this can go on. Like I'm comfortable with this life cycle. So if for example in iteration with what I'm working on, if Julian's MR would not have been merged, then also it's like just fine. Now it's merged. So as long as it's smooth enough, as a developer, it's fine. As the customer facing, like Heinrich said, that it depends on how critical that is. If it's like we have to be very cautious about, but I think it's just smooth enough. I need to know more about critical issues that customer has faced at gitlab.com to comment more, but it was nice. Like it's just good to, like you said, velocity, like you worked on it, you tested, it works fine. Let's just, deploy it. It doesn't really matter same milestone or the other milestone. So for me personally, like I have that view. I don't know if it really makes sense. I'm sorry.
No, and that makes sense. I was more curious just because we spent a decent amount of time and to put together like a training, like a some type of training thing. But I don't know if anyone outside of when we first did it and people watched it, I think then, I don't know if anyone's watched it since, or it doesn't sound like we're requiring new engineers to see the training. So I don't know where how we expect everyone to kind of know what the rules are if we did want to figure out a way to govern this, or to require that the milestone delay in getting GraphQL features out. But I'm gonna take that as a action item and see what's going on there. But ideally, we don't even, like, it's not even really going to be too valid because we figure out a way, or we're okay with us gracefully degrading on smaller features, like Heinrich had mentioned. Kushal, you had an example.
Yeah, so in past milestone, like I was working on the confidentiality badge support on task list, and one of the other features that we were supposed to work on was to basically show a tooltip of creation and close time for task item within the list by showing the timestamp in the tooltip for the icon itself. And since the timestamp connections within the GraphQL query for created at and closed at were not available on the query. So in the same MR, I exposed those fields on GraphQL and then started using it on front end. But then we realized that we cannot merge it because of the multi-version compat. So I had to remove the user-facing part of it, just introduce the GraphQL change, had it merged, basically created a backend only MR. And then in 15.4, I ended up using those new fields. So basically had to wait for a full milestone to have it running. So yeah, certainly. And again, we realized it on very last day of the freeze. You already were part of that thread and we were discussing that the maintainer suggested that this would break multi-version compat. So I had to basically spin out a separate backend MR, then got it reviewed and merged. And then basically had to drop all the front-end code that was basically using the backend changes. So it definitely sucks. And I hope that we basically get around to it, especially like, let's basically start using same GraphQL, newer GraphQL features in the same milestone. And there is this unrelated thread on the GraphQL channel, which was basically suggested. So it basically was posted by Charlie. There was a Hacker News discussion on whether GraphQL, after all these years, is still a viable thing to do. And there were some thoughts, and one thought that I had was to basically, what is the usage of our GraphQL public API? Like, are there too many applications written on the GraphQL public API similar to REST? Because if the usage is not that much, why not just make GraphQL API internal only? I mean, I'm not saying we should drop GraphQL entirely. We should definitely use it because it allows you to get rid of a lot of front-end boilerplate code. But if the community users are not using just the API, then let's make it just a private API, internal thing, and we use it for ourselves. But for public, a REST API would be the only, because right now, I mean, when you look at REST API, it is so flexible to a point where you can basically write very complex curl scripts using a REST API and do whatever you want, which is not the case with GraphQL. I mean, I cannot imagine writing a shell script that would send a GraphQL query, fetch the data, and then consume it to my own liking. So I'm sure that I'm not the alone to feel this. So if GraphQL adoption outside of GitLab.com and users at large is not as much, then maybe we should not have it public facing and just use the rest for the community users and have GraphQL internal only.
The problem with doing that is we currently only develop new features in GraphQL, and that means that if we want to make any new features available on the public API, we'd have to duplicate the work and build it in the REST API. So I'm not sure it's viable in terms of workload for the backend.
So
as nice as it sounds as a front-end engineer, I'm not sure it's realistic.
But aren't we already doing it, like having the features available on REST as well?
I've seen some of those issues of like rebuilding things in REST, and I'm not sure that's a great idea, to be honest.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it would be disappointing to see a new feature not available on REST API, because like I have a ton of applications on Mac OS and some scripts using REST API extensively. I know that work items is not available fully on GraphQL on REST APIs. Like, work items were exclusively designed in a way to be available just on GraphQL. But yeah, if we aren't doing anything on REST for any new feature that we introduce, that would definitely be sad thing to see. Because I remember when I joined GitLab, like our motto was that whatever that you see on GitLab.com as a feature should be available in our REST API as well. Basically, users should be able to build a full GitLab UI on top of our APIs.
Yeah, so
it's a conversation way outside the team.
Way outside GitLab. Like we're going into the pros and cons of GraphQL versus REST. Heinrich mentioned the API Vision working group. I wonder if they're working on, because originally the plan was to go 100% to GraphQL and then use something that converted use a layer on top of the REST API. So that was automatically created off of the GraphQL API. Is that still is that what they're trying to tackle, or are they trying to tackle where we want to in the future commit our resources towards?
Yeah, that's an option. So they're looking at different options, and I saw one option discussed. I haven't been really updated, but I saw an option discussed before was where like the REST API v5, we could introduce v5 with a parameter to select fields that you want, because if this is the main feature we want from GraphQL, right, like smaller payloads and selecting the fields. So yeah, that's like one example.
You can do that in REST now?
No, but I mean,
Oh.
you could implement it in REST, right? Nobody's nobody prevents you from adding a param like only fields equals, something, right? And
we have it for some of like the MR sidebar or whatever it is fields. We have like basic entity versus other.
Yeah, we have like include subscribed or not, because subscription is like expensive to compute. So we kind of end up with something like that. But I think their vision is more like maybe something more dynamic where you could like all the fields are automatically like selectable or something, maybe, or I don't know. But yeah.
To be honest, when we move stuff from REST or internal to GraphQL, oftentimes we're still bringing in everything from the payload anyway. Like we're requesting all fields anyway, so our payloads aren't really much smaller than they used to be. But that's more of just our doing as to why we don't have those benefits of smaller payloads. All right, so Kushal wants to go back to REST.
Not for the front end apps, but at least I would certainly love to have the limitations of GraphQL gone, because it is public facing. Like even when we were working on work items, we had to basically have the API in alpha state, because like we were doing breaking changes frequently. And I can imagine like if we didn't have to deal with GraphQL being publicly available API, it would have given us much more flexibility, like with the modifications and everything. Like we could basically do whatever we want in the same milestone without having to worry about things breaking.
Yeah, I mean, we still have the multi-version compatibility issue with the REST APIs, but it's not as noticeable because if we're not requesting a field from the front end that could or could not exist, if we need something from the REST API and it isn't there, then it's a lot easier to gracefully fall back. Just if we don't have that, don't show that part of the UI. But with GraphQL, if it's just one field in the larger query, everything fails. Which
and
kind of
even
feel
with
like
the public API thing, like we can't break public API, right? Thing compatibility. REST API also has the same problem because we make the same guarantees with our REST API. We can't make breaking changes, right? So it's kind of annoying also when we work with REST API like that. And I kind of prefer like the internal Rails controllers where we don't guarantee that this is going to be public. And so, yeah, so if we make GraphQL internal, it would be kind of like that, right? Where we don't guarantee that the form or the response would not change or the fields would not change. And it makes development much easier. And yeah. Although one thing I would say about GraphQL is even if we made it private, I'd still like hate it somewhat because of like the hoops I have to run into just to implement something. Like in the Rails, vanilla Rails, you just have a new controller action, return this JSON, all that. And then in GraphQL, I had to create a resolver, I had to create a type, create this.
So many files.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
There really is on the on the Rails side. There's so much boilerplate that needs to be done anytime you create anything new.
So you're saying the problem is Rails, right? Not GraphQL.
The GraphQL implementation of Rails, the Ruby implementation of GraphQL.
Yeah, the way Ruby deals with GraphQL sounds like it's the problem, really.
I don't know if maybe other implementations also do the same thing, just because to accommodate like GraphQL's like queries and all that, there has to be a
Well,
repository and all that. I don't know. I haven't
I
tried
know
the
that
others.
I know that it's much simpler in like JavaScript and TypeScript, for example, because it's all like it's so it sounds like it's way simpler in that ecosystem than Rails.
So I think GraphQL was developed by Facebook basically because they were using a database that was graph based, like it was a tree based database and not the relational tables, right? So maybe that basically was a natural fit for them, and we are trying to basically build a graph based API on top of relational database. I mean, just guessing. I mean, that may be the reason that we have to do a lot of boilerplate code on top of Postgres.
I just want to say, I don't know, there are not so many people who like GraphQL, but I'm loving GraphQL because I don't I know about the resolvers and stuff, but for me personally, for the REST API, when I was working with it, I had to always constantly be in touch with the backend about, discussing the contracts and everything. Now here, it's like I just go to the Explorer, see the input type, the backend. I know the, the amount of work that goes behind it. Like you said, you have to write the resolvers and everything. But for me as a developer, now it's so much easier that I can and especially being in an async culture, I can imagine if would have been a REST API, I would have pinged, just imagining the backend developer and waiting for the next day. Now it's like everything is available. I can just see the Explorer, it's merged. I can I'm not, because it's like I don't have to wait for the contract or anything. It's there. I can see what fields are available, what's the input type, what's the output type. And it's just so much. I like GraphQL more than REST. I don't know. It's just so much better. I don't know about the graph-based, why, if we are especially building graph-based tables, to use GraphQL in GitLab, but just to use GraphQL, but I like it. I mean, it's good. As for me as a developer, it's just easier to use in REST because I'm not dependent. I can just see everything. I know the types, expected output, and it's just whatever fields I want to take, I can take and not take. So yeah. Totally unrelated, but then
I just really like the tooling. Like I like using graphical over like Postman or whatever you use for REST, just REST tooling. That's probably my favorite thing about GraphQL.
Yeah, we should remember to ask Deepika again after 6 months or a year.
Yeah.
What she thinks.
Definitely. That's what I'm saying. Maybe I'm the only one having different views here because I've not spent too much time in it. So definitely we'll have this discussion again after 6 months. Yes.
Yeah, it's also good to hear from someone like you and the advantages, because we don't, I guess even if it's REST versus GraphQL, we don't feel that advantage. Like you said, we're exploring things because we kind of already know the REST API and what it looks like and how data comes out from that. But yeah, you saying that it's very helpful from a newcomer or a new contributor's perspective is also a good point.
For example, the iteration thing, for example, Julian is in leave, right? I just looked at that, what MR he's done. I just went through, I've been going through everything, the GraphQL, what he's written. I can see the types. I can see, it's just easier for me to see things. Had it been REST and I had been I would definitely would have waited for him to come to, so it's just like, I'm not dependent on asking questions. It's just there. If it's not working for some stupid thing I'm doing, that's up to me. But definitely it should work as it is there in the Explorer. So yeah, that really helps for me, yeah, as a contributor. Yeah.
Cool. You all have anything else you want to talk about? I guess it is the first of the month, huh? Kind of. Simon and I had this issue that we talked about earlier today where it's the first Wednesday of the month for me, but it's the second Thursday for you all. So I guess it's not the first of the month.
Well, it's our first
APAC.
APEC.
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. But it says first of the month. It doesn't say first of the location. And I don't have any metrics highlights anyway, unless anyone else does.
Hey, if you look at the agenda, the last meeting was August 31, so it's actually the first meeting of the month.
Right. It definitely is. There have been some cool numbers that that Gabe and Melissa have been sharing around task usage. What was the last one that Gabe shared? I don't know where it was. Does anyone remember where he posted it? Oh yeah, 2,586 unique users on GitLab.com created a task in August.
Yeah, it was hard for me to understand if it was like a good number or a bad number, like how.
Yeah, how many well, unique users, it's probably a good number. I don't know how many tasks were created, but I think it was something like per issue that had a task. There were 3 for GitLab.com. There were 3 tasks. Yeah, 2.9 tasks per issue.
Yeah, like test 1, test 2, test 3, right?
Perhaps. But hey, 2,500 people testing it. Pretty good. Even though one
Now
person
you can
probably did.
upset them by breaking stuff.
There you go. By
I
adding
did
a
see
new
some
GraphQL
feature
field.
requests come in though, so I kind of feels like people are using it, right? If they're requesting features. I saw one user created an issue about like reordering the tasks, and so, yeah.
Cool. All righty. Well, let you all go half an hour early, right? Yeah, we still have an hour. Cool. Well, it's good seeing you all. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Nice day.